Is your company moving applications into public cloud? Well, now you have problems, as your on-premises security products don't work for public cloud, traditional security assessments don't give you the real picture, and the biggest security threat is now misconfiguration of your cloud workloads. CloudNeedy offers you a cloud-native approach to manage security, data privacy, and compliance. With CloudNeedy, you gain instant visibility into your security posture and the ability to continuously monitor and remediate any deviations. Take a free test drive of CloudNeedy's continuous cloud assurance platform by visiting cloudneedy.com/security weekly. That's cloud, N-E-E-T-I. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observe It combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observeit.com/security weekly. The modern attack surface is vast and permeable, extending from the data center to the cloud and device edge. Security teams are stretched thinner and thinner as they try to cover this ground. The result? More high-profile breaches hit the news every day. Don't let your organization be next. ExtraHop delivers security from the inside out, helping enterprise security teams detect threats up to 95% faster and cut staff time to resolve by 2/3 or more. Act with confidence. Learn more at extrahop.com/security weekly. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us on April 1st through the 3rd at Disney's Contemporary Resort for InfoSec World 2019. It's going to be a lot of fun, lots of great presentations. InfoSecWorld.misty.com. Use the code OS19-SecWeek for 15% off. And, of course, we'll be doing free briefings and paid interviews. SecurityWeekly.com/conference request. InfoSec World 2019. Also, we'd like to welcome TwoFin as a proud sponsor of the show. As the market leader of award-winning security policy orchestration solutions, TwoFin provides enterprises with the ability to streamline the management of security policies across complex, heterogeneous environments. With more than 2,000 customers, TwoFin automatically designs, provisions, and analyzes and audits network security configuration changes from the application layer down to the lower layers. So make sure you check out TwoFin. Is it securityweekly.com/TwoFin, TUFIN, to learn more. Kind of a nice segue into what we're talking about today in terms of vulnerability management. And one of the things I was thinking about, Matt, was I think we used to think of vulnerability management as, okay, I've got a system, it scans other systems, maybe some applications that live on those systems, it gives me a report, and then I go fix them, and that's vulnerability and patch management. However, fast forward to today, we've got significantly more challenges in making sure that we're covering all of our technology. It used to be BYOD and cloud, but that's just exploded. So I broke it down into 3 different areas that I wanted to talk about how we address vulnerability management in these 3 areas today, because I think it's changed so much, even since the last time we've talked about it. I started with applications, and we talk about DevOps and containers, and then even applications in general, like desktop and software as a service. And what are all these new challenges? And I think largely we've addressed the container issue. There's some pretty good support today, especially from Qualys and Tenable on the container side. Of course, they've made very strategic acquisitions in that area. Rapid7, I'm not sure. I haven't caught up with them in a while. I'd be interested to see. It would surprise them if it wasn't on their radar to be more ingrained in the container platform. Of course, they've got a great web app scanner that they're building into their DevOps pipeline. But, Matt, this is the space you came from. So
yeah, I know they have plans. I don't remember seeing any announcements on this front yet, but they realized after the NT Objectives acquisition, which gave them web app scanning capabilities, that there was a continual evolution they were going to have to go through on the container side. It'll probably come out as a static solution first, which is where Qualys and Tenable started. And then it'll eventually probably morph into some sort of dynamic container capability, which is what Qualys bought with Layered Insight. The other two haven't gone there yet. So I know there's plans. I don't think there's anything more formal yet. I haven't seen it yet. from Rapid7, but I think all of them will have to continue to move into additional application security capabilities because that's where the growth is.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at traditional device vulnerability management, and look, I've done a ton of briefings with investors on all three of these vendors ever since the Tenable IPO. And at the end of the day, device vulnerability management, it's a $1 billion market growing at 6 to 8% CAGR. It's not any bigger than that. I don't care what numbers you pull, it's no bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happening is application security is actually growing way faster, more in that 16 to 18%. And I think this year it will actually cross over being a bigger market segment than device-based vulnerability management.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be well over $1 billion and continuing to grow. So the growth is in the application side for the VM vendors.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it's bringing the right capabilities to the market, which I think Qualys has done a really, really good job of over the past few years. I think Tenable and Rapid7 will have to catch up a little bit on that front, but I see some big growth on the application side to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what also plays into vulnerability management for me, if you're a security engineer, right, is your software inventory. If you're building software, or even if you're implementing applications off the shelf, someone's going to pull a library or some kind of add-on that is going to introduce a vulnerability. And those can be some of the most mysterious, as you may not know if there's a vulnerability or not. And I think that has to enter into the equation. I know Tenable made an acquisition that could help, and I think so did Qualys. I think their acquisitions, respectively, could help with that problem. But they need integration with something like a Black Duck or White Source, right?
Yeah, there's others out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have Black Duck, White Source, Sonatype, kind of doing the open source validation of containers and images and stuff, looking for those open source vulnerabilities. Pair that with then custom code, where you have your source code analysis guys, right? Veracode, Fortify, etc. Those two pieces, right? You take an open source component and some custom code, and you combine them together into a container image in a binary. Goes through a build process. Who's analyzing that, right? This is where Qualys and Tenable have had solutions. Yep. You have Aqua, Twistlock, StackRox. There's a number of them, right? And so it's those pieces. And I think the big question for the DevOps teams, ultimately, because I'm a big believer this is a combination of DevOps and security, is where in the DevOps process do you want to do the validation? Do you want to do it before the build, part of the build, after the build? Where's the best integration point? And then based on that, it probably helps identify which tools are better suited to do pieces of those, right? I still see a need for source code analysis as part of custom code. I see the need to validate the final binaries. The question is, do I need something a little more robust than what maybe Black Duck, Sonatype, and White Source can do out of the box, because I need a broader binary kind of static analysis tool? Or not. And I think those are some of the decisions that are going to have to be made by the DevOps teams based on where they want to plug these different solutions into their overall DevOps process.
Mm-hmm. Now, the other, in the application kind of bucket, overarching umbrella, we've got desktop applications, and that's always been challenging. Largely, I think support for third-party applications has gotten pretty good in terms of your vulnerability management. It's a problem we've been tackling and implementing solutions for some time. The SaaS applications, which obviously are very, very popular, right? There are controls that have been built in for some time on that front too. So I kind of feel like on the desktop and SaaS front, we've made some good strides in vulnerability management. It has to be included as part of your program. But I think we've made good strides.
Yeah, where I've seen most of the progress on the third-party software on the desktop has been through the patch management solutions. The things that Automox has done and others to make it really easy to do third-party patching, as well as your OS patching, I think is an advantage, right? So that helps you with the Javas, the Adobes, the base third-party stuff that you're using on the side. That made that process a lot easier. SaaS gets a little more complex because you don't have a lot of control over a SaaS-based application. It's built by a company and offered out as a SaaS platform. You have some configuration capabilities. And so you've seen solutions come out that kind of build some APIs into the SaaS application looking for some misconfiguration data, but you don't have a lot of visibility into a SaaS-based application just because there's so much behind the covers you can't analyze because you don't have access to source code or any of those other things. So those are, I still see the SaaS-based applications as a little challenging still, even though there are some better configuration management tools out there for them.
Now, the second bucket that I had, Matt, was infrastructure, because we still have infrastructure, right? I mean, I think we're always going to have some level of infrastructure that we need to worry about.
Somebody does, yes.
On premises, right? Or, even in the cloud. I mean, you still are probably going to make some of those decisions to, like where in the stack do you start, right? You take a service like DNS. Do you just go to a completely cloud-hosted system, or there's everything in between from having your own physical server, right? So I still think we're going to have infrastructure. I think we've made good headway in that front. Certainly, I think some of the issues that we still deal with today are in the IoT, and if you look at your devices that are on your network, right, network infrastructure, for example, I still think there's challenges there.
One of the big challenges years ago was, getting your arms around all the device configurations. You used to have to, get into the box and grab the running config and parse it and analyze it and, validate all that stuff. So we made some strides there, but I still see an abstraction of the network layer coming. It's been coming, but I think it gets even more so. Software-defined networking, the ability to configure this stuff in the cloud. You're pulling aspects of the infrastructure away. We're abstracting it out. Now, yes, some are still going to exist on site. You're still going to have devices connecting on site. The question is, where's the importance of on-premise networking and networking devices that are basically serving up clients to connect to applications?
Right. Your switches and your Wi-Fi infrastructure is basically what you're going to end up maintaining. There's going to be very few servers, I think.
I agree, right? And if all my servers and my applications are up in the cloud, then what capabilities do I need up there to monitor that infrastructure? And that's where things like CloudWatch and CloudTrail and other things that AWS have built really gives you some of that visibility into their environment. So how much of that do we actually have to deal with? I think the important part here is some integration between what the cloud providers will give you with those types of services. Integrate that with some of your on-prem stuff just to have a better central kind of visibility across that hybridized environment. But I think it's the other devices, the IoT devices, and some of the other things that get a lot more challenging.
Yeah. It's interesting. When we talk about this, I'm separating in my mind your office, versus your like production or manufacturing. So there's inevitably always going to be some type of physical infrastructure if you're a manufacturing plant, if you're a studio, if whatever your business is requires that physical infrastructure, then this infrastructure security is always going to apply. And you can't take a machine that's on the assembly line and stuff it in the cloud. Like that stuff is always going to be there, right? But your office side of things, if you're a software company, let's say, and you have employees, I think largely most of your stuff's going to be in the cloud, in SaaS solutions as well. And your infrastructure isn't, to your point, Matt, is going to be a much lower priority and hopefully more resilient and robust and not really need as much care and feeding. I had a firewall that was at my house. I don't know if I posted it on Facebook. It'd been running for over 400 days in my house. Like this is I don't have an IT staff in my house. I am the IT staff, and it was running just forever. And it's like, do you mess with that? I'm like, I'm waiting for my backup firewall to come in before I even touch the thing, right? And I think the physical infrastructure is going to present those problems more so than the cloud. But I think, as you said, Matt, over time, it's going to be a lot less of a priority.
Yeah. And, I think it's this interesting concept of the reemergence of the edge. And, I think of a power plant as an edge. An airplane is an edge. A hospital is an edge. Think about all the telemetry devices in a hospital, right? those require some level of physical infrastructure. They're also going to have a lot of sensors, what we kind of call IoT, but I think them more as industrial IoT kind of devices, right? There's all these sensors in each of these edge environments. Now what we have is this evolution of new edge technologies, leveraging containers and building these new apps to kind of bring this data centrally in and then maybe send it off to a cloud provider, maybe not. It'll be interesting to see how these edge platforms, and then what do we do with managing and protecting these edge platforms? What happens as part of that? Those are some very interesting areas that I think all the vulnerability management guys will have to evolve a little bit.
And it's interesting you say that, Matt. As I researching, firewalls and edge devices, many of the operating systems and software basically run in virtual and container environments. Because you can buy systems that are so fast now that your firewall is a virtual object, right? And that makes it much easier, right? So I don't have that physical device that's been in my house that's running for 400 days, right? Maybe I do, but it's just the platform. My firewall rides in a virtual container or environment on top of that. And when I want to upgrade or do a new one, right, I spin up a new one, and then in software I can swap them back in and out. That's some of the trends that I'm seeing, on that front. So it could very well be you've got a lot less infrastructure and it's more virtualized. The amount of hardware you're going to have moving to the future is going to be very small.
Yeah, that's where these new serverless-based platforms are coming in. So you can just spin up all these containers, and one of those containers is going to be a firewall or whatever that defines that network. That's where I see the challenge for some of the bigger hardware vendors at the end of the day is can they virtualize all their stuff, put it into container environments, and be small enough to get embedded into these new edge kind of platforms, because that's where I see the market going.
The last category that I had, I still kind of struggle with the mobile aspect. I think this comes down to being able to construct your perimeter today and design it such that it's validating the user, authenticating the user, and then doing a similar thing with the user's device and software that they're using, right? And so how do you need to do vulnerability management on your iOS and Android devices? And then what about Chrome OS, which I know is not, from what I understand, embedded into the enterprise today. However, I see it as a huge opportunity for Google, because largely we're not going to need, full-fledged desktops anymore. If all of our applications, as we're saying, are going to be up in the cloud and our infrastructure is up in the cloud, I don't need anything. I can use a small device like a Chromebook or a smartphone or tablet to access it. And then how do you need to do vulnerability management? I guess is my question.
Well, this is where Tenable had an advantage in its portfolio with the passive vulnerability scanner.
Yes.
Because you didn't have to scan the devices. Scanning these devices are very tough. Think about this. I got a tablet or a phone. I bring it into work, 9 a.m. I use it. It's connected to the network. I go home at 5 o'clock. And at 7 o'clock, my scanner kicks off. And it scans the network, because you don't scan during production. You scan off hours.
Right.
Those mobile devices aren't even on the network during that window. Okay. So how do you catch them? How do you look for vulnerabilities in those devices? So that's where Tenable's passive vulnerability capabilities actually came in pretty handy, right? As soon as those devices connected to the network, there were detections to say, iOS version, Android version, are they vulnerable or not? It gave organizations a way at the enterprise layer the ability to see those devices on the network, identify whether they were vulnerable, and then maybe integrate with the MDM or the MAM or whatever they were using to say, look, these devices need to be upgraded because they're vulnerable. That was the advantage of the passive sensor in the Tenable portfolio, which Qualys and Rapid7 didn't have. I know Qualys bought some assets.
They did, yeah.
Some parts of capabilities. I don't recall them introducing anything yet. I don't know if it's actually a live product, but that's how you would go after the mobile devices, in my opinion, because it's the only way you would ever see them on the network, because you're never scanning during business hours.
Right. Yeah, and I think management and monitoring of those really does come down to network. It's incredibly difficult or expensive, right? Depending on how you're solving the problem to do that. I mean, there are some vendors that are trying to do the software-defined networking and funnel, people through the cloud, and with great success in some cases. But I think largely it's still challenging, and it really falls outside of traditional vulnerability management. Matt, the passive scanner is a great point. That's really how you have to treat these devices. I think more and more when it comes to these devices, enterprises are taking more of a hands-off approach. Although I see opportunity in the future to do Chrome OS. I mean, Google's platform for managing Chrome OS is terrible, like terrible. And so I think that's an opportunity for security vendors to do that. I see them, integrating more and more into the enterprise, especially with Google Cloud. I mean, it's all going to tie together, right?
Yeah. And this passive capability also works for IoT devices that are on and off the network constantly. It works for industrial control systems where you're never going to actively scan those devices. We've talked about the ICS challenges of different protocol detections, et cetera, but the passive approach is a good way to manage and monitor those devices as well, because you're not actively scanning them. So the passive capabilities can solve multiple potential use cases, not only mobile, but also some of your IoT, industrial IoT sensors, as well as your industrial control systems. And that's probably the main approach, but it's integrating that data in with everything else that you have, running it through a set of prioritizations, right? To really identify where do I focus? Do I have really risky mobile devices, ICS or IoT devices, or is it more important for me to patch my critical servers and desktops? That's all going to be part of the prioritization game. That's I think the longer term opportunity for the VM vendors. But as I said in the last segment, I think it's going to require integration of other data sources outside of your own, because I just don't see many organizations only deploying one vulnerability source.
Right. Closing thoughts on the state of vulnerability management today.
My thoughts? We still have some work to do. But I think the path is pretty straightforward. We know people are moving to the cloud. We know people are moving to applications. We know that this environment's going to continue to shift and morph. I think the biggest thing that we have to think about is, how do we bring all this data across all these hybridized environments together in a way that we can really start to prioritize across a much broader set of data, whether it's our data or somebody else's data, because that's what the organizations, the enterprises really need at the end of the day. They don't want a bunch of point solutions because it's going to be too hard to manage.
Yeah.
We've got to learn that prioritization has to be easy. And that means I have to be able to integrate lots of data sources and make it really easy. And that, I think that's the long-term vision for where these vendors need to go.
It actually reminds me of my interview with Tim from vArmor. They're very much playing in this space that you really just described.
Yes.
That was on Application Security Weekly this week. Yeah, episode 50, so check it out. Awesome. Matt, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. We'll see you next time.